Hey guys, Brent Hull, going to do a deep dive into my book, Historic Millwork, all about doors. Come join me. Okay, so you know my book came out. Ta-da! If you want a copy of it, you can send a note to our shop, info@brenthull.com, and say you want a copy and that you want it signed, and I'll sign it. So for the same price, you can get it from Amazon, you can get it from us, and I'll sign it if you're interested. I'm excited about this book because basically my first historic millwork book was 1870 to 1940. This one is 1740 to 1950. Now, the reason that it stops about 1950 is because post-World War II, if you've heard me talk about it before, is kind of when building falls apart, production builders and everything else. Hollow core doors, late 40s, early 50s. So no more historic millwork after that time. So I wanted to do a deep dive into doors today, and there's a whole chapter on doors. Basically, for this book, I reviewed probably 40 historic millwork catalogs. I've got hundreds, okay, but just about every 10 years, I've either found a pattern book or an historic millwork catalog and studied doors in each of those things. So going back all the way back to Asher Benjamin, the Carpenters Guild in Philadelphia, just how they built doors, how they thought about doors, and that's what you'll see in here is examples of doors and how they come together. So if you're interested in doors, how they're made, all that stuff, this is the book for you. Now, essentially, the book is broken up because we moved back to the 1740s. We're talking about a pre-industrial and a post-industrial era. So pre-industrial is handmade, and about 1840, 1850, 1860, we move into the post-industrial. Steam-powered mills begin to get going on, and so things are no longer made by hand, completely by hand. And so you have a pre-industrial and post-industrial revolution. This is my drawing of a factory in the early 1900s, 1890s, and an explosion of doors. That's what that is. So if we're looking at just doors in general, okay, the earliest door is a plank door, okay? And the plank doors are an early way that if you have an opening, how do you board it out? How do you put it together? Very simplest, crudest way to building it is you put a bunch of boards together, and then on the back side you put these planks or these boards, these battens as they're called, together. And so a board and batten door might look like, if this is your door, right, you might have all these boards running vertically this way, and on the back side you'll have what's called a batten here going on the back side that holds those boards together. It's a very early, simple type of door. The ranch project that we're working south of here is a good example of why I wanted to introduce a plank door in that job, is because it's rustic. It's an early type of door. And so playing around with the wood, playing around with the choices, we can actually put a door in there that contributes to the story as this rustic early type of building. I mean, you see plank doors in a comeback in the 1920s and 1930s as a way of giving that a period of revival, English-French look, authenticity. So a plank door is a really rich, good history door that can really contribute to the architecture and styling of your house. Essentially, in the pre-industrial era, you have 4-panel, 6-panel, 8-panel doors. And if you go into the Greek Revival era, you have this 2-panel door. So there isn't a lot of variety back then. There isn't a lot of things going on. Okay, now there's subtle changes and subtle things that are happening. For instance, this door here is a 1-inch door. Okay, so a 1-inch door in that pre-industrial era was fairly common. Okay, if you wanted a thicker door, you might nail 2 of these doors together. Now, this is a 1-inch door that was made in probably the 1880s, 1890s. It isn't historic, and the reason I know that is because of the way the panels are done. Okay, but I'm looking at a early door, and look what's going on here, and look what kind of makes this charming is, one, you didn't have mortise locks. There were, but they're very rare in the 1740s, 1750s. So you'd have had an iron face latch, okay, with a brass knob that kind of is a lift latch here. There's a spring in this thing that holds it down. You could have moved this over to lock the door, but an early door like this would have this kind of lift latch. And look what's happened on the hinges. The hinges it's called an H and an L hinge, okay? Why is it called that, Brent? because it looks like an H and it looks like an L. So these hinges would have been mounted to the frame, and then your casing would have been back here, okay? So the plaster would have been, kind of at this level. This would have been your casing. This would have been your frame. Your hinges are latched right onto it. And so this is an example of kind of an early door from that pre-industrial era. Now, if you look at maybe the front door or something like that, you might have had brass, okay? So this is a brass rim lock. It's the catch is kind of mortised into the trim. But in that pre-industrial era, talking about very simple doors that were made by hand. The joinery in these things would have been a mortise and tenon that kind of went all the way through the door, okay? It might have been pegged. You might have seen it pegged. So early doors from this era, nicer doors, okay, things like from Asher Benjamin or something like that, would have had a little bit more decoration, in the detail. But a Georgian door, 1740s, might have a raised panel. A Federal door would have a flat panel. Greek Revival doors would have a flat panel. Their profiles would change a little bit. So the profiles that are put into the stile and rail might have changed a little bit. So subtle changes. Certainly you can look at a door from this period and go, oh, that's Georgian, oh, that's Federal, right? Georgian because it's got raised panels, Federal because it's got flat panels. There are ways of looking at the doors and kind of seeing those differences and seeing that stuff. But again, you're talking about a very simple era. Going into the post-industrial era, after the steam engine, after the railroads, as the country expands across the West, you begin to have an explosion of doors, an explosion of different styles, different variety. And if you look in the Millwork catalogs from the 1870s, 1880s, I'll just show you some of the pictures in there. You have kind of these examples of hardwood doors, okay? Now, why do you have oak and burled walnut and all these fancy hardwood doors post-industrial where you don't have them in the pre-industrial? Because you have now machines that can help you mill oak and cherry and walnut and all these hardwoods much easier. In this picture that comes from a pattern book, you're actually seeing burled and grained wood inside these panels. Very complex joinery, very complex details that are going on here, how these doors are put together. So you're looking at doors with a great deal of complexity. I mean, there was manufacturers' catalogs where that was the picture. It's like one of my Wednesday design videos where I'm showing different ideas of what's going on, but you weren't meant to put doors that didn't match. What they're showing is that there was so much variety available at that time. They were saying in the comments of the books of the 1890s, well, let us know what you want. We're happy to build it for you. This is a door that came from an 1890s courthouse that we ended up restoring and redoing. This is a door that wasn't being used anymore, but look what's happening and look at all the complexity that's in this door. One, we've got this raised panel mold, okay, that's also on this door holding it together. If you look at the joinery on the back side, I've got through mortise and tenons, okay? Now, mortise and tenon this is the tenon as it comes into the mortise, right? And so this one's through. That means it goes all the way through the back of the stile. What you see here is if you look at the different grain patterns on here, you see that the grain is very different here on these ends. These are called wedges. And essentially what happened on this door is as the mortise and tenon was made, if I've got my stile here and my mortise coming in there, my rail coming across, in here I have a tenon coming in here, right? And where it comes through the back side of this door, how do they secure it? What they did is they actually took wedges, okay, and drove the wedges in here just like that to lock everything together. So you're looking at a through mortise and tenon with wedges held there to hold that tenon firm. Now, why did they do that? Well, they didn't have good glue at that time. They had animal hide glue, which wasn't waterproof. So you'll oftentimes see pegging in these doors. You'll often see these wedges and stuff like that because they needed doors to be held securely and held together well. Now, what's crazy is that that through mortise and tenon with the wedges actually came out of fashion, okay? And so what happened is that people didn't want to see that anymore. And so what they ended up doing was they did the same thing. I'm just drawing another example here. And they stopped the tenon, okay? It wasn't a through tenon, but they still wedged it, okay? They still wedged to lock it together. And how did they do that? Here's the inside look of a tenon. There's your tenon that's coming through there. And there's the wedges that were stuck inside there to lock it all together. This is a blind tenon wedged, okay? Again, it was a building technique that rail was driven into the stile and locked together. They had these blind tenons, blind wedges in there that locked the whole thing together. It was a really slick way of building and putting it together. This is called a stave core. Now you might have heard me talking about stave cores because we think that's a great way to build a door, because the stave core is very stable. But look how thick the veneers on either side. So I've got a softwood stave, okay, and I've got an oak veneer that's going on top of this thing. So this is an oak door with a stave core, blind wedged and tenoned, right? So crazy cool different things that are happening in this post-industrial era as they're trying to figure out the best ways to build, the best ways to put it together. Another company, about the same time in the 1890s, actually puts together a dowel, and one of the first dowels that come together. And so instead of doing tenons, what they did was they did dowels that went into here and went into there, okay? And the reason they did that is because it was easier and faster. Instead of having to cut the tenon on that rail, all they did was they made the stile, they made the rail, and then they drilled these holes, and the dowels held it together. Now, Brent Hull bias think that that's not as sturdy a door, that's not as strong a door, that isn't going to hold it together as well as a through mortise and tenon. So I have my biases, but what's happening is the doors get less and less well built as manufacturing speeds up. How can we build it faster? How can we build it cheaper? They're started making all these changes. Now, in this period, especially on interior doors, you have the 5-panel door. This is a ubiquitous door, 1890s into the 1915, 1920, this horizontal 5-panel door. And then as you get into the 1910 to 1930, the 2-panel door becomes the most popular interior door. And then after World War II, you have the hollow core slab door. Now you might have seen me tear apart some of those doors. Basically, it was 2 veneers on either side, and there was a cardboard grid inside here. So inside here, there's this grid of cardboard, okay, that does like this. And then these 2 veneers, so there's cardboard, there's an edge in here, and then they put a very thin veneer over top of each one. And so you go from a door that's all wood with raised panels, stile and rail, to something that is kind of cheaper, right, put together. Now, what they have today is they have a picture of a door, right? It's pushed into a piece of plastic, and the plastic is put on either side of this. The same kind of foam and cardboard are in the inside of these. These just aren't as cheap, which is why I quit the book at 1950, because those things start to fall apart. So this is a study of doors built during that period, what they look like, especially interior doors is really what I'm showing you, and how these building techniques change. And I'm just going to show you some of the variety as we do a walk around in my office, just kind of show you some of the doors that are available and how doors kind of have this personality and have this way of communicating. Look, here's an early door, okay? This is a gunstock style door. Why is it called a gunstock? Because it goes from a thin rail to a thicker rail right here where it gets locked together. There's the pegs. See the pegs? See the mortises coming through? So the tenon's coming through a mortise, right? It's pegged, like I was talking about. There's your pegs holding those things together. And there's a very early door, probably 1880s, okay? And this one actually has a movable sash inside. So this one actually has a sash over top of it that would have allowed light in here. So now, we think that came from an old stagecoach. We're not sure. But look how doors change. Look how they communicate. This is a French door, okay? This is a door that we made. We made it out of cherry for a job. Look how the panels are different. I've got a lower panel with a raised panel mold. I've got a raised panel. I've got a different panel profile between here, and then look what's on the back. I got flat panels, okay? And so Europeans, and especially French, had different personalities depending on the public or private side. So on the public side, they would have a door that was very fancy like this, and on the private side, they would actually have a door that was much simpler. Now, what we've done is we took number 2 cherry, okay? We have a combination of different building techniques that make it cool and make it different. Notice I've got raised pegs in here, emphasizing that. I've got the character in the wood with the knots and different things happening here. So there's a way to communicate here. There's a way to tell a story with the doors that you're building, all by just the different panels and different wood choices and different materials you use. Look what we did here. We've got a 3-panel door, also kind of a French style door. Look what we did with the panel down here. I've got actually a little diamond insert here that we've got inside this lower panel, and we're showing actually kind of a knotty oak here. It's like a number 2 oak, and then a very clear thing. So just kind of playing around with this look. If you look at this door is from an A. Hayes townhouse. This is longleaf pine and cypress, and so we've got these historic woods that were really common in the 1880s, 1890s. This is original to my building, 1921, okay? Notice I have that kind of 3-panel design and then this big open glass above, but this is the 5-panel door. If I took another panel here, another panel there, I've got a 5-panel door here. So doors communicate, doors tell a story, doors are a great tool to help make your projects more interesting and better, and just the way you put them together, just the hardware they use, just the construction techniques, all kind of tell a story and make things more interesting. So the other thing about doors that I think is so interesting is that I'm talking about the hardware, I'm talking about the joinery, I'm talking about the style and how it's laid out. Those things are all sleuthing tools. So, you know, another great purpose of this book is that if you're looking at a house and going, I wonder if that door is original, or I wonder when that came in, or I wonder when that hit. If you have a 1750s Georgian house and you have a 5-panel door in there, you don't have an original door, right? The hardware is going to give it away. The panel arrangement is going to give it away. The fact that they put the veneers oftentimes in these 2-panel doors is going to give it away, right? Because plywood doesn't happen until kind of a late Victorian invention. And so there are sleuthing tools that you can use that you look and as you walk through houses and you're trying to figure out when they are there. If you have a 1740s house and your doors are 1 3/4 inches, you probably don't have an original door. But if you have a 1-inch door, then you're like, okay, well, maybe we're getting close. And so there's all kinds of subtle little clues that these doors tell us, okay, if we're good students of understanding kind of how they're put together. It's all in the book, Historic Millwork, 1740 to 1950. It's available at Amazon through Wiley, but it's also available through our website. But I think it's a great resource for architects, for preservationists looking to add architectural oomph to their jobs, looking to add integrity, texture, authenticity to their projects. This will really show you when things were available in the catalogs, when they showed up, what style were they, so that your jobs can be more authentic, be more beautiful. I think it'll help out. Let me know what you think. I'm Brent Hull. Thanks for watching.